Brisbane Port picking up a brace. And finally, the draw for the expanded AFLW competition has been released today. 2 conferences have been established. Conference A includes Western Bulldogs, Melbourne, Adelaide, Fremantle and North Melbourne. The Brisbane Lions, Greater Western Sydney, Collingwood, Carlton and Geelong are in Conference B. The teams in each conference play each other once, plus 3 crossover matches from sides in the other side of the draw. The top 2 teams in each conference will then qualify for the preliminary finals. Glenn, you can also jot the grand final down in your diary. Will either be played on March the 30th or the 31st.
Narrowing it down at least. Thanks very much, Brendan. Talk to you again in 30 minutes' time. In the meantime, to the roads and James Engelman's report from the Australian Traffic Network.
Glenn, thank you. And Brisbane First to Smash on the Centenary Highway and Victory Pocket Road, Victory Pocket. Also a breakdown the Gateway Bridge, flowing southbound Eagle Farm as well. And sending a smash in Lee-Rick Heights on Lisbon Drive, Smithfields Road, but in Darren Joey Road and Carlton Parade, and a breakdown sending southbound on the Greenway and High Street as well. Melbourne accident, Dublin Road, Greenvale and Kirkland Drive, Ballarat Road, Stray, and also Swanson Street, Parkville and College Crescent. In Adelaide, a smash, Grange Road, Bendon Road, Flinders Park. Also one in Keswick on Richmond Road at Railway Terrace. And in Perth, an oil spill causing dramas after an earlier smash, Whitford Avenue and the Mitchell Freeway overpass at Craigie. I'm James Engel, but that's the latest national traffic.
To the latest weather for the capital cities, Brisbane now on 32 degrees, one of those hot and mostly sunny Brisbane afternoons. Sydney on 22, that's your forecast maximum, and a mostly clear day from here. Partly cloudy in the capital Canberra, 25 right now, we'll take you there soon. In Melbourne it's 17 and cloudy, Hobart mostly cloudy, sitting on 16 degrees, while Adelaide currently on 23 on what is a sunny Friday. Also sunny in Perth, 26 degrees at the moment. In Darwin, 32, and a partly cloudy day for you. We'll take a look at the weather forecast for some of those suffering drought at the moment. Doesn't necessarily look that good in the months and years to come. We'll find out more in a moment. 4:15 Eastern Daylight Time, 4:45 South Australian Time, Queensland 3:15, Northern Territory 2:45, and 1:15 in the West. Wherever and however you're listening to ABC News Radio, good to have your company. It's time now to check the stories making headlines.
ABC News headlines.
The Prime Minister's used today's National Drought Summit to announce significant extra funding for immediate and long-term drought assistance. Details coming your way in a moment. A woman's told a jury she was scared for her life after she was bashed and tortured by Victoria police officers while she was in custody. And police in the United States have searched a postal sorting office near Miami as investigators try to find the origin of at least 10 suspected pipe bombs sent to prominent critics of President Donald Trump. Well, to the National Drought Summit in Canberra, the Prime Minister has announced a $5 billion fund to support community services, research, technology and infrastructure. The money's to come from the Building Australia Fund, which at one stage was earmarked as a source of money for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. The summit's been attended by a number of political and agricultural leaders from around the nation. The ABC's national regional reporter Brett Worthington was also there following events for us, and he joins us now from our Canberra bureau. Brett, good afternoon. What has the Prime Minister unveiled?
Well, this $5 billion future drought fund has been the big centrepiece of this summit. And while it won't do much to, I guess, support farmers in drought at the moment, the whole focus is to future-proof their properties. That if you look back at coverage of droughts for the best part of the last 5 decades, all the stories are very much the same. Drought hits, a whole lot of money gets thrown at farmers and communities, and the structural reforms that are needed to better prepare for these events just isn't there. So the Prime Minister and the states that have seen this.
The President handles this march, which to me is also reminiscent of Gandhi's Salt March or the civil rights marches of the 1960s in its moral urgency. How he handles it is actually a delicate political matter and could cut both ways as we go into the final days of this critical and, at this point, very confusing election.
I've been talking to Bruce Shapiro, Executive Director of the Data Journalism and Trauma at Columbia University. In 2001, I spoke to Marilyn Waring on the program, just located that vintage recording, and in the intro we said of her, Marilyn Waring is an accomplished economic theorist whose ideas about social policy and economic practice have received the imprimatur of no less than J.K. Galbraith. She's on the program again. She's got to stop doing this propaganda for 16 or 17 years, and I am delighted to be welcoming her after a little bit of music. Marilyn Waring is invariably she refuses to wear one, described as a woman well ahead of her time. Well, if she's ahead of her time now, imagine how progressive she was back in 2001. Let me remind you that in 1975, a big year in Australian politics, Marilyn Waring became the youngest MP in New Zealand's Parliament, and later the only woman in the caucus of Peggy Muldoon's Conservative National Party. She wasn't, of course, a Conservative, and would in fact go on to challenge everything from attitudes on gender to attitudes towards the environment. And eventually she would fall out with her own party over its pro-nuclear stance, and that would facilitate the arrival on the political scene of my old friend of the program, David Longing. Now, if all that wasn't enough, she'd write a best-selling book, Counting for Nothing, What Men Value and What Women Are Worth, which questioned the patriarchal bent of economic systems. 30 years on, now a professor of public policy at Auckland's University of Technology, Marilyn is in Australia to give a keynote at Griffith University's Integrity 2018 conference. I'm so happy she could join us from the Brisbane TARDIS. Marilyn, welcome back to Late Night Live.
Well, thank you very much, Philip. It's lovely to be talking with you again.
Marilyn, as you look around the current heated debates over all your pet issues, gender, the slow response to climate change, when neoliberalism is taking us, what are your thoughts at the moment?
Well, my current focus really is asking the question, what is going to follow GDP as a key element of policy planning? And even though I've been working on this for about 30 years, I actually feel more optimistic that we're going to move to something that has more to do with people and less to do with the market than I have ever been. And largely this is because it's really hard to work out what the GDP is measuring anymore and for whom. We've got multinational companies just registering wherever they can shift the most profit abroad. Ireland was a very good example of this, and it just threw up its GDP by 26% to try and take account of the Google's offices that were there as tax havens but had nobody in them. And there's so many other distortions.
You could just put it on the chair in the studio here that he's sitting.
Basis. And so that's making me optimistic.
Well, before we join you dancing on the streets, let's walk this back to our last conversation and remind the listener what made you very, very angry, because then the GDP despite all the odd things it measured, did not measure women's contribution, their unpaid labour.
Well, it didn't measure anybody's unpaid work. So that would be all voluntary and community work or unpaid home maintenance.
목소리 달려대듯이 시련 속에서 우린 더 강해지려라 그때의 강력하라 만나는 기도 찬찬 백년 후에 진실은 우리 멈춰서지 않는다 우리 두려움을 버린다 우리 엎음치며 나간다 사회주의 승리의 길로 한마음 뭉쳐 몸도는 사랑이 오고 한뜻이 되어 못 이기 광풍이 없네 언제나 강을 밀고 계속을 붙여 미신의 대로 속에 신념도 우리 멈춰서지 않는다 우리 두려움을 버린다 우리 엎음치며 나간다 사회주의 승리의 길로 수치의 감기 날리며 나가는 우리 사회주의의 강물을 일러 세우리 충돌의 강이 펴지 찬란한 미래로 세계를 기억하며 멈춰서지 않는다 우리 두려움을 버린다 우리 엎음치며 나간다 사회주의 승리의 길로 우리 멈춰서지 않는다 우리 두려움을 버린다 우리 엎음치며 나간다 사회주의 승리의 길로 멈춰서지 않는다 우리 두려움을 버린다 우리 덮음치며 나간다 사회주의 승리의 길로
Assuming for nothing, does this now join the rank of all the unpaid work in terms of transactions, or is it possible to consume something for free in terms of the GDP? Then they have, because all politicians and economists have played this chicken and egg game for many years, where they've said, oh, you know, politicians really need to have comparators. They like to compare their GDP with some other country. And my response to that is, well, the advisors haven't been honest then, have they, in telling the politicians you can't really do this. But they, for example, another thing to look at is everything that's exchanged is supposed to be in the GDP. So if you even just think about members of the OECD and the numbers of those who have legalised prostitution, so you take that out of the non-observed economy and you now put it in the cash economy, and now you can get revenue from it, and then you look at Portugal and Canada and parts of the United States that now have marijuana being retailed and taxed and earning VAT, and then you try to compare that with countries that don't have that. You've got no idea what you're reading anymore.
And that's a cause for optimism.
It's just beyond belief. She's just a beautiful child, a beautiful teenager.
The District Court has heard an Adelaide driving instructor passed licence tests in exchange for bribes. Rebecca Opie has more.
38-year-old Joe DeMarchi pleaded guilty to more than 20 corruption offences, including accepting bribes and dishonestly dealing with documents. He was arrested in September last year after an investigation by the state's independent commissioner against corruption. During a pre-sentencing hearing today, the court heard university students Abdul Kajani and Ethan Quadros bribed DeMarchi to pass Kajani's driving exam because he was too nervous to sit the test. Prosecutor Leah O'Donnell said the offending was arrogant and showed a blatant disregard for the law.
Let's have a look at finance, and yes, it was a late run thing, but we just made it over the line on the share market to round off the week. The All Ordinaries finishing largely flat, back where it started the day, just up 0.1%, a 0% change. The ASX 200, 0.02% higher, that's 1 point to 5,665. It was a different story on Asian markets as they continue to trade. The Hang Seng is down by 222 points and falls elsewhere as well. Gold at $1,232 US, West Texas crude oil up to $67.15 a barrel, and the Aussie dollar against the American currency falling, as it is on most of the major comparisons. It's down by about 0.75% now to 70.3 US cents. We'll keep you posted. In the meantime, let's get a bit of Friday sport. Go to see you, Brendan Arrow.
Great to be here, Glenn. South African cricket captain Faf du Plessis says there's no bad blood between his team and Australia following this year's ball tampering scandal. The Proteas have arrived in Perth to begin preparation for their limited over series against the Australians, beginning at Perth Stadium on Sunday week. Du Plessis says there is still respect between the two teams.
We love playing against Australia. It's two similar teams, how they set up, very, very competitive natures. So absolutely no bad blood, no.
In domestic cricket news, there is plenty of excitement around the grounds on day 2 of the Sheffield Shield cricket. After dismissing Australia for 159, Victoria is 7 for 308. Marcus Harris has been the standout for all 178 runs of 323 balls. That includes 15 boundaries. Victoria now leading by 149 runs. In South Australia, the Redbacks 3 for 265, now leading the Queensland Bulls first innings by 34 runs. Tom Cooper also hitting a century a lot quicker, 130 runs of 192 deliveries. He has 16 boundaries and 2 sixes. And in the third game being played in Perth today, the Western Warriors are 4 for 176, still behind the Tigers on 50 runs. In the first innings, the Tigers bowled out yesterday for 226. Australian batsman Sean Marsh is trying to find some form with the bat. He's looking pretty good with 71 not out off 124 deliveries. In soccer, Sydney FC say they are happy with the Sydney Cricket Ground's transformation into a rectangular pitch for tomorrow night's derby against the Western Sydney Wanderers. The A-League match will be the first soccer game played at the ground in over 30 years. Sydney FC coach Steve Corica says the side has trained on the pitch twice this week. They're confident of a win in front of big crowds.
We will win. We expect to win. It's another derby game. We know what they're all about. We've got to be at our best and make sure we're ready for everything they throw at us. And we want the 3 points badly as well.
Adelaide United and the Newcastle Jets are hunting their first wins of their season as they clash tonight to start round 2 of the competition. The Reds began the year with a 1-1 draw with Sydney FC, while the Jets had a 2-1 defeat away to the Phoenix. News radio listeners will be able to tune in for live coverage starting from just after 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. In AFL news, newly recruited Melbourne Demons player Stephen May is supporting the prospect of the Northern Territory creating a standalone club in the AFL. Darwin May will play in front of a home crowd in the Territory for the first time in 15 years next season after giving up his co-captaincy of the Gold Coast Suns to be traded to the Melbourne Demons. He says he's excited to represent Melbourne as the Territory's affiliated side, but would like to see him move towards NT forming its own club.
Tasmania is trying to get a team as well. It's one of the even goals, so make sense for the Darwin or an NT basically, wherever that may be in the league as well. But taking the 20 teams and not being on something.
And in horse racing news, the superstar mare Winx will be shooting for an unprecedented 4th Cox Plate tomorrow as Australia's premier weight range contest takes place. In an 8-horse field, Winx is the clear favourite to achieve the staggering feat. Jockey Glenn Schofield will be aboard rival the Villas, and he told ABC News Radio Sylvan the Till he's realistic about the chances against the mighty man.
When you're competing against Winx up to this point, you're clearly riding a horse that's inferior to her, so you're trying to find a way that you can get away from her and she has to run and catch you. So you do one of two things. You try and sit and wait and go with her, and then she outruns you, or you go earlier and try and get her off the bridle, and you've probably gone a little bit too soon, and then she just runs over the top of you.
Glenn, that's the very latest in sport. Thanks a lot, Brendan. Hear from you next time around. In the meantime, let's see how you're travelling on our roads. James Engelman knows from the Australian Traffic Network.
Thank you. In Brisbane, first smash in P3 Anzac Avenue at Station Street. Also one at Tarragindi on Wellers Road and Birdwood Road. In Sydney, we've got delays there with a smash on Elizabeth Drive, Smithfield Road, Bonnie Ring Heights, one at Newport, Barrenjoey Road and Carlu Parade. A breakdown southbound in Tarman Tunnel causing dramas there as well. Melbourne accidents there, New Street, Ringwood and Moreland Street, Liverpool Road, Kilside South and Somerton Road, Greenvale. In Adelaide, we've got a smash there at Anglevale Road, Brad Court, another in Tranmere, Glenburn Road, Arbor Street. And Perth and Oil still after an earlier smash in Craigie on Winters Avenue at the Mitchell Freeway overpass. I'm James Engelman, that's the latest national traffic.
All right, James, thank you very much. Time for us to have a look at what the weather's doing right now. And if you're listening in Brisbane, it's doing pretty well. You're sitting on 30 degrees on what is a hot and mostly sunny day in Brisbane. Mostly clear and sunny in Sydney, but about 21 for you. 26 in Canberra though, partly cloudy. And in Melbourne also a cloudy day and at your forecast maximum of 17 degrees. Hobart's there as well, 17 and cloudy. Adelaide warmer on 22 on what is a clear Friday. Perth looking good, sunny and currently 27 degrees. Darwin going one better on 31 and a partly cloudy day in the top end. We'll have a look at the weekend weather forecast for you in the next half an hour, but stay with us in a moment. Why are we all eating so poorly? Bit of a report card on our diet. And I think we get a failing grade. Details coming up. 4:45 Eastern Daylight Time. South Australia's hit 4:04. It's 4:45 in Queensland. And if you're with us in the Northern Territory, 3:15. It's still around lunchtime in Western Australia, 1:45.
ABC News headlines.
The Prime Minister has used today's National Drought Summit to announce significant extra funding for immediate and long-term drought assistance. The mother of a teenager abducted from regional New South Wales 21 years ago says she hopes a $1 million reward will uncover new information. The Federal Energy Minister says the government would only force big energy companies to sell off assets if they fail to reduce power prices. And film director Fred Skepsis told a Sydney court newspaper stories at the centre of the Geoffrey Rush defamation case are disgusting overkill and trial by media. Well, it's not good news. A new report shows that regardless of what stage in life we're at, Australians are suffering the effects of a poor diet. The Australian Institute of Health and Welfare has compared age groups against food and nutrient recommendations. It found 1/3 of Australia's energy comes from junk foods, while about 99% of children don't eat enough vegetables. Joining us now to have a closer look at this is Claire Spark, the head of the Population Health Unit at the Institute. Claire, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You say we're eating too much of what you call discretionary food. What is that?
So discretionary foods are commonly known as junk foods, so things like sweet biscuits, potato and corn chips, ice cream. It includes alcohol for adults and, pastries, those sorts of things.
All right, so all the things we're not necessarily supposed to be doing, but we seem to have a certain taste for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So about, as you said, about 1/3 of our energy at most life stages is from discretionary foods.
Gives us energy, but not the nutrients we need. What should we be eating more of?
So Australia has dietary guideline recommendations, and they talk about core foods across 5 food groups, so vegetables, fruit, grain foods, meat alternatives, and dairy alternatives. So they're the types of foods we should be eating.
And it's not like we're not aware of that, it's just that it's not translating into what comes onto our table.
Yeah, well, exactly. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear like the healthy eating messages are dominating over, our want to eat discretionary foods.
We might watch a lot of cooking shows, but we don't necessarily eat the right food. Does our diet change much as we age?
Yes, so children in some areas of cooked foods, they actually are meeting the requirements. So very young children, for example, are meeting requirements for dairy and some grain foods. And as we get older, adults aren't meeting any of the recommendations.
Not at all.
No.
I even saw, I think those aged 51 to 70, alcoholic drinks make up 1/5 of their discretionary consumption. So booze almost becomes one of the major food groups for many as we get older.
Yeah, so 1/5 of their discretionary food intake. So yeah, that is quite concerning that older Australians do appear to be drinking more alcohol than they should be.
Different problems for different people. What are teenage girls missing out on?
So teenage girls in the 14 to 18-year-old group aren't getting enough calcium. So that's quite concerning that their calcium intake isn't high enough. And that's similar for actually older women as well with the calcium requirements.
That's what I was about to ask. And they miss out on the iron as well.
Yeah, they do. So it's actually middle-aged women that aren't getting enough iron. So they're definitely areas for improvement.
If 99% of children up to the age of 18 aren't eating enough vegetables, it's a bit alarming. How much is enough?
So our dietary guidelines have certain amounts of serves that they suggest we should be eating, and that it varies by age group. So it's depending on our size. As we age, we get bigger, of course, so we need to eat more vegetables as we get older. But the serves vary per age group.
But about 5 serves of vegetable each day?
I think that's recommendations for adults, yes.
Right, so I remember the phrase, I can't remember who said it, eat well, but not much, mostly plants. Is that fair?
I think that's fair enough. We do need to, the dietary guidelines do say that we should also, be eating grain foods and meat and dairy as well.
Do you follow these guidelines, Claire?
Do I follow these guidelines? Well, I'm probably one of the Australians that doesn't meet my requirements in every area, like most of us.
I was going to say, it doesn't sound like you're alone. I'll stick my hand up as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much.
The head of the population unit at the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare suggesting we all can do better.
This is ABC News, keeping Australia informed in more ways, more often.
To the United States, where police are continuing to hunt for whoever was behind the series of suspected mail bombs sent to prominent critics of Donald Trump, with more parcels addressed to former Vice President Joe Biden and actor Robert De Niro discovered overnight. The White House's rebuts suggestions Mr. Trump's inflammatory comments may have incited the attacks, instead blaming the media for causing division in America. For more on another extraordinary week in the US, I spoke earlier to the host of the ABC's Planet America program, John Barron. John Barron, remarkable developments this week, with many Trump critics and rivals receiving pipe bombs in the mail, prompting calls for the president to stop his attacks on critics and political rivals and stop trafficking in the politics of division. Is it fair game to partly blame him for these attacks?
It's a really interesting point we've gotten to, Glenn, because Republicans have, and President Trump himself, the White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, have all pushed back on that suggestion that somehow President Trump is to blame because of his often inflammatory rhetoric. And it's no coincidence, obviously, that all of these people have had pipe bombs sent to them so far, including actor Robert De Niro, are prominent critics of Donald Trump. So there's clearly a common denominator going on in the middle of all that. Now, some on the sort of conservative fringes are saying, ha, this is clearly Democrats doing this to make Republicans look bad. The bottom line is that it does make very conservative Americans look bad, those that would kind of, advocate this kind of carry on. But for President Trump, the difficulty, of course, is that, nobody really thinks he's being sincere when he tries to call for unity and tone down the rhetoric. So he can't really
sort of play that traditional presidential role of being the consoler in chief or taking the high moral ground, as, say, Bill Clinton did in 1995 after the Oklahoma City bombings of a federal building, which well over 100 federal workers and children were killed by a couple of white supremacists who set up a truck bomb there. So we're dealing with slightly different territory and a slightly different time, and certainly a very different president in the middle of all of this. But for President Trump to seek to turn it on his own political rivals and his rivals in the media by saying, no, it's not my fault that we've got this sort of level of partisan rancor and hatred in the United States. It is actually the fault of the media, the negative coverage that I receive in the media, those that don't believe that I won the 2016 election fair and square. So, everybody's got their own narrative right now, and this is, kind of feeding into the build-up to the midterm elections on Wednesday week, our time. So, of course, this is going to continue to be received in a highly partisan kind of a way.
Yeah, that's the criticism, that he uses the office of the president as a kind of partisan bludgeon to keep the other side on the defence. He uses presidential power for its own sake, perhaps to his benefit. So if we've got a situation where what used to be normal political discourse is now caught up in this high-powered partisan warfare, that's what people are saying is tearing the country apart. What then did you make of the Trump administration's response? They seem to say one thing originally, but then do another.
Yeah, it's the old example of when President Trump is literally on script, on message. He's reading prepared remarks, such as he did at the White House after the first devices emerged, and then in the opening section to a campaign rally that he gave on Thursday.
Too easily seduced and dazzled by the wrong things.
Well, it's a familiar theme of his life. If you look at the characters that have led him astray, there is a common theme between them. He does fall in love with people. He acknowledges this himself, and he lists, as a great example where, the Hollywood film producer who he got very close to, called Brett Ratner. He says in the book that people have compared Ratner to the former CEO of OneTel, Jody Rich, who everybody would remember from corporate folklore was the sort of magical guy that ran that telco. James compares them because he did fall in love with both of them, and he got burnt in the end by both of them. I think he's in a better place now with Ratner than perhaps what he is with Rich. But yeah, there is a common theme, and there's plenty of others in between in his life where he sort of gets bedazzled by these people. Those 100% into
I think I've done a pretty good job. Damon Kidney, The Untold Story of Being James Packer. It's published by HarperCollins. Tonight, it is time for me to thank the team. Stan Collin, Sasha Fargan, Anna Whitfield, Julie Street, Aretha Slee, Ray Ewan, Tim Jacobs, and Hamish Camilleri. See you next time.
competitors, 8 days, the Invictus Games Sydney 2018. With every sport streamed live on iView and all the action every day at 5 p.m. on ABC TV. Then join Chris Barth, Limo and inspirational competitors every night at 8 for Invictus Games Today. The Invictus Games Sydney 2018, exclusive to ABC.
G'day, Mark Fennell standing by here.